Everything passes to your sister. Mr. Thompson read my father's will, his voice steady and measured. The walnut-paneled office seemed to shrink with each word, the weight of the final decision weighing on me. I sat motionless with my hands folded tightly in my lap, and Sarah's smug smile grew wider and wider. The sunlight streaming in through the window highlighted the diamonds on her bracelet, the one Dad had given her last Christmas. Another reminder of his unwavering favoritism. In my 34 years, I watched the final act of my father favoring her over me. As I expected, the properties at 235 Oakwood Lane, 678 Riverbend Road, and the Malibu Beach house went to Sarah Jane Clark. The family business, Clark Enterprises, including all assets and subsidiaries, goes to Sarah Jane Clark, Mr. Thompson continued, adjusting his glasses. Sarah leaned back in her chair, practically glowing. She was dressed for the occasion. A gorgeous dark blue designer dress, perfectly painted nails, neatly styled hair. She embodied everything my father valued. Ambitious, obedient, married to the right man, mother of perfect children. On the other hand, I had disappointed him at every turn. Choosing to become an environmental scientist rather than a corporate successor, divorcing the husband he chose when I refused to tolerate his infidelity, and building my own life, my own success, outside his narrow definition of achievement. "That's it?" asked Sarah, her voice oozing fake sympathy. Turning to me, she pouted her lips. "Oh, Lexi, I'm so sorry. But you know how Dad felt about your choice." I met her gaze without flinching. "I know perfectly well, Sarah," I replied coldly. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "A small personal effects account has been set aside for Alexandra, containing family photographs and some jewelry you inherited from your grandmother." Sarah laughed in relief. "Well, at least you have family photos. I don't know where you'd put them in your tiny flat." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Are we done here, Mr. Thompson?" The lawyer nodded, visibly relieved that I wasn't making a scene. He'd probably seen enough inheritance battles to know that they rarely ended cleanly. But I wasn't about to give Sarah the satisfaction of seeing me broken. "Lexi," she called out as I walked to the door. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. There might even be a place for you at Clark Enterprises, entry level, of course." I turned to her and gave her a strained smile. "That's very generous, Sarah," I said evenly. "But I'll manage." The drive home was quiet, the trees along the road glowing with autumnal shades of gold and scarlet. Mom had always loved this time of year. She would have despised what Dad did today. I got a text on my phone from Sarah, "Dinner tonight. We need to talk about your future." I ignored it, just as I'd ignored her insincere gestures after Dad's funeral last week. Instead, I parked in front of my cozy bungalow, a charming house I'd bought 3 years ago with no deposit. Once inside, I went straight to my study, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thick envelope. Mom had handed it to me 2 years ago, just a few months before her sudden passing. "Don't open it until your father is gone," she said, her frail hand trembling. "Promise me, Alexandra." And I promised. Now, as I carefully flipped back the lid, everything finally made sense. Inside were stacks of documents, many digital files, neatly organized. On top lay a letter written in Mum's elegant handwriting. "My dear Alexandra, if you're reading this, it means your father is gone. And I'm sure he did exactly what I feared. Your father was a brilliant businessman, but he never realized what really mattered. Pride and outdated beliefs blinded him to the most valuable thing he had: a daughter with vision, integrity, and a heart to change the world. While your father was building Clark Enterprises, I was slowly building something of my own. 20 years ago, I began investing in sustainable energy companies. Your research on conservation inspired me. While your father saw your work as naive idealism, I saw the future. These assets have grown significantly over the years and are now worth much more than Clark Enterprises. All titled in your name, slowly and legally transferred through a network of investments that your father never questioned. Sarah won't be able to touch a single cent. Use it wisely, my dear girl. Do what I always knew you could do. Love, Mom." My hands trembled as I went through the paperwork. Stock certificates, investment portfolios, offshore accounts, all part of an empire quietly created right under my father's nose. He didn't suspect a thing. The sheer enormity of what was happening kept me awake. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. Seriously, Lexi, we need to discuss arrangements. Dad would like us to work together. This time I picked up the phone and calmly replied, You're right, we need to talk. Come by tomorrow morning. I have something to show you. That night, I stayed up late studying Mum's papers, marveling at her genius. She invested in wind farms, solar panel companies, ocean cleanup projects, anything I dedicated my career to. While Dad thought my passion for environmentalism was naive idealism, Mom had been quietly supportive all along. I remembered Sarah's smug smirk during the reading of the will, how she was always on Dad's side, belittling my choices. Tomorrow she would finally learn the truth. At exactly 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. Sarah stood on the doorstep, dressed in yet another designer outfit, her expression balancing between concern and superiority. Her gaze swept round my house, barely concealing contempt. Oh, Lexi, she sighed, stepping inside. We really need to talk about getting you settled in properly. You shouldn't be living here. This isn't the place Clark deserves. I ignored her barb and led her into the dining room. You're right, Sarah, I said evenly. We need to talk. Mum wanted you to see something. At the mention of a mum she'd never been close to, her face tensed slightly. What are you talking about? She demanded. I gestured to the papers spread out on the table. Take a look. Sarah hesitated for a moment before picking up the first page. As she perused the contents, her smirk faded, replaced by shock. Her hands began to shake. Her face lost color and then flushed with anger. This can't be real, she whispered. Mum was a simple housewife. She didn't know anything about business. I almost laughed. Over the years, Mum had played the role of the quiet, supportive wife while secretly building something much bigger than Dad or Sarah could have imagined. Oh, it's real, I said firmly. Every document is corroborated. Mum knew exactly what she was doing, and now so do I. Sarah slumped in her chair, her polished composure crumbling. But Dad's company, Clark Enterprises, is mine now, she stammered. Just like he wanted. Exactly, I finished evenly. Dad gave you what he wanted. But Mum's inheritance? It belongs to me. And it's worth 10 times what you inherited. A silence hung between us, broken only by the quiet tapping of Sarah's fingernails on the table. She was reorganizing, strategizing, trying to regain control. Finally she spoke, sinking into her board member persona. We could work together, pool our resources. Think about it, Lexi, given Clark Enterprises' infrastructure and these assets? No, Sarah, I interrupted her. It's not what Mom wanted, and it's not what I want. You got exactly what Dad planned for you. It's my way. Her mask slipped for a moment, exposing emotion, danger, perhaps even fear. But she recovered quickly and stood up abruptly, clicking her heels sharply on the floor. You're making a mistake, she muttered coldly. Perhaps, I smiled. But committing it should be me. Sarah sprinted out of the house, her expensive heels clattering on the pavement with every step. I exhaled deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. Mum was right. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes the quietest players make the biggest moves. Now I had the tools to really succeed. The next morning I woke up to 14 missed calls and a flood of messages from family members. Thanks to Sarah, rumors were spreading fast. Alexandra, it's Aunt Patricia. How could you do this to your sister? Your father will be horrified. I looked at the locked safe in my office where I kept duplicate copies of all the documents. I thought about the fact that my lawyer was already drawing up plans to preserve Mum's inheritance. Smiling, I typed my response to Sarah's last message. You're right, it's just beginning. I sighed heavily and put the phone aside. My mother always reminded me of the importance of respecting personal boundaries, and today I just didn't have time for family arguments. I needed to focus on work. My first order of business was to go to Harrison and Associates, the law firm that had quietly overseen Mum's empire over the years. Unlike Mr. Caldwell, Dad's pompous corporate lawyer, Alice Harrison was sharp, modern, and unwavering. Right on schedule, she said when I entered her office. Your mum predicted Sarah would try to argue this within days of finding out. I settled into the chair across from her desk. What do we do next? Alice pulled out a thick folder, her lips curving slightly. Your mother left very specific instructions. She knew that Sarah could challenge the possessions, probably by claiming that your mother wasn't mentally healthy when she made those agreements. I snorted derisively. That sounds exactly like Sarah. Alice's eyes sparkled as she slid a stack of documents towards me. Your mother spent years documenting everything: business meetings, investment decisions, even notes of conversations with financial advisors. It's all in here. Your mother didn't just run an empire, she ran a long-term game. A delighted smile slowly spread across my face. Mum was 10 steps ahead of everyone else. And that's not all, Alice continued, pulling out another document. Your mother also left instructions regarding Clark Enterprises. She suspected that your father's company might try to interfere with some of her environmental initiatives, so she had certain measures in place. As Alice laid out the details, I felt something settle in my chest. Not just relief, but clarity. My mum hadn't just left me wealth. She had left me a strategy. My next stop was the laboratory of Dr. James Thompson, one of the leading researchers in marine pollution prevention. Mum's papers revealed that she had anonymously funded his work for many years. The lab was nothing like Clark Enterprises. No fancy glass-walled offices, no marble floors, no expensive artwork. Just linoleum, cluttered workstations, and scientific posters. It felt more like home here than in Dad's world. Dr. Thompson's eyes widened when I introduced myself. Your mother was our anonymous benefactor. We've been trying to thank her for years. She believed in your work, I said, placing the contract on his desk, and I want to increase the funding. It's time to take the research to the next level. As we discussed expansion plans, my phone kept buzzing. Another email from Sarah. You can't just walk away from family responsibility. Dad created this legacy for us. I stared at those words, thinking about Dad's legacy. Ruthless business tactics, disregard for the environment, manipulation. Then I thought of Mum's sustained innovation, careful planning, quiet strength. The choice was obvious. That evening, pulling into my driveway, I noticed Sarah's Mercedes parked outside my house. She was sitting on my porch steps, her perfect hair slightly mussed and her expression unreadable. She stood up as I approached. We need to talk seriously, Lexi. I unlocked the door and let her follow me inside. Unlike yesterday, she didn't comment on my house or the furniture. I spoke to the board of directors of Clark Enterprises today, she began, pacing around the living room. Our stock plummeted when news broke that my mother owns sustainable technology. Investors are nervous. I leaned back against the back of the couch, crossing my arms. Sounds like that's your problem. Sarah turned to face me. It's our problem. She snapped back. This is about our family's reputation. Do you have any idea what people are saying? That Dad was so obsessed with preparing me for leadership that he lost sight of the fact that Mum had built something bigger right under his nose. They call him short-sighted, outdated. They're not wrong, I replied flatly. Sarah stopped pacing, her face flushed. How can you be so cold? I mean, we're talking about my father. Yes, I said firmly, meeting her gaze. The same father who cut me out of his will because I refused to follow his plan. The same father who mocked my work, rejected my choices. I paused, my voice getting firmer. The same father who taught you to do the same thing. Sarah flinched. I never. But she faltered, because we both knew the truth. She laughed with him when he called my research a waste of time, when he scoffed at Mum's idealistic nonsense. Sit down, Sarah, I said softly. Let me show you something. I opened my laptop and pulled out the presentation I was working on. These are projections for the next 10 years, the impact of climate change on coastal businesses, trends in environmental regulation, the growth of the sustainable technology market. I clicked through the slides, letting the data speak for itself. Dad's business model is dying. Mum saw it coming years ago. Sarah leaned toward me, her business mind engaged. Clark Enterprises can adapt, she said slowly. With the right partnership. With my money, I corrected. With your investment, she objected. Think about it, Lexi. We could honor both of our parents' legacies, combine the company's modernized approach with sustainable innovation, and in doing so, I would remain in control? I asked, raising an eyebrow. That's not going to happen, Sarah. I'm tired of living in your shadow, trying to prove I'm worthy of the Clark name. The expression on her face tensed. Is that what this is about? Revenge? I closed the laptop. No, this is about me finally doing things my own way. Mom gave me that freedom. Sarah didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. I don't know how I'm going to make it without you, Lexi. Daddy always said we're stronger together. Daddy said a lot of things, I replied, keeping my gaze on her. But most of the time he was wrong. When she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the back porch. The evening air smelled like autumn, crisp, fresh, full of change. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd been preparing all day. Dear Clark Enterprises Board of Directors, my name is Alexandra Clark, and I am writing to address the recent revelations regarding the sustainable technology my mother owns. It's time to make my own move. Sarah was right about one thing. This was just the beginning. The next morning came another storm in the form of Uncle Robert. My father's younger brother and a member of the Clark Enterprises Board of Directors showed up unannounced at my door. Your father would roll over in his coffin, he declared without greeting, furious that the company's stock price had plummeted. I let him rant on, hardly listening. He was always Dad's echo, rolling his eyes at my tree-hugger ramblings during family dinners. Are you done? I asked when he finally caught his breath. Alexandra, be reasonable, he said, changing tactics. The family name is exactly what I'm protecting. While you and Dad were clinging to outdated business practices, I folded my arms. Mom was building something sustainable, something forward-looking. His face flushed. Your mother didn't understand anything about business. She was just the woman who outsmarted all of you, I offered. The one who built a billion-dollar empire while you ignored her. His mouth pressed into a hard line. You're making a mistake. No, I replied flatly. I'm correcting yours. He ran out, slamming the door with such force that the glass rattled. I had a hunch that future family gatherings were going to be very interesting, but I didn't have time to think about it. I had a meeting with a group of environmental scientists who were trying to fund their coral reef restoration project. Thanks to my mom, I could help. As I drove, I thought about how much had changed in just a few days. Mom's gift was not just financial freedom, but an opportunity to make a difference. My phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah, board meeting tomorrow. Last chance to work together on this. I smiled, remembering the email I'd sent last night and the plans that were already in motion. Good luck with the meeting. I have other commitments. It's time to create my own legacy. The morning of the Clark Enterprises board meeting brought unexpected news. Their stock had fallen another 15% in pre-meeting trading. My phone buzzed with a headline from the Wall Street Journal. Clark Enterprises faces investor exodus amid sustainability crisis. I was sitting in my home office reviewing research proposals when Sarah burst in on me, still dressed in her boardroom suit. Her perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the fury in her eyes. What have you done? She demanded, tossing a stack of papers onto my desk. Half of our major investors are threatening to pull out of the company. I glanced at the printouts, letters from Clark Enterprises' largest institutional investors. Concerns about environmental impact. Questions about outdated business practices. Warnings about market volatility. I leaned back in my chair. Funny how transparency works, isn't it? Transparency? Sarah's voice became sharper. You sent our investors environmental impact reports. Reports that your research helped compile. Not mine, I corrected. Those reports came from independent environmental agencies. I just made sure the right people saw them. Sarah slumped in her chair, her composure shaken. The board of directors is in a panic. They're talking about emergency measures, maybe even selling off divisions to stay afloat. I nodded. They should be concerned. Tomorrow, Mom's companies are announcing major sustainability initiatives. Breakthrough technologies that will make Clark Enterprises seem like a relic of the past by comparison. Sarah exhaled sharply. You're destroying everything Dad built. I met her gaze. No, Jess. Dad destroyed it himself. Mom spent years warning him about sustainability and modernization, refusing to adapt. He ignored her. Jessica's fingers clenched into fists. This is your revenge. It's business. My voice was as cold as my father's always was. Isn't that what he taught us? The market evolves. Companies adapt or die. Before Sarah could answer, my phone rang. Alice Harrison. Turn on CNBC. Something's going on. I switched on the television. Sarah turned pale as a news ticker scrolled across the screen. Clark Enterprises Board of Directors is calling an emergency meeting. The CEO position is being considered. Sarah's breath caught. They can't do that. I'm my father's successor. But they could, and they were doing it. The news anchor was already dissecting the board's decision. How Sarah had failed to anticipate changes in the market, how Clark Enterprises was losing investors, how the company was falling behind on sustainability issues. At that moment, Alice's voice rang out. The board of directors is receiving another set of documents. Your mother's reports detailing all of Clark Enterprises' mistakes and how they could fix them. Sarah turned to me, and then it hit her. You planned this. I shook my head. Wrong again, Sarah. I don't want Daddy's company. But I do want the world to see why his way of doing business doesn't work anymore. My phone buzzed again. A letter from Dr. Chen. His team had achieved breakthrough results in an ocean cleanup project. You should get back to the meeting, I said, standing up. It sounds like they have a lot to discuss. Sarah rose slowly, squaring her shoulders. This isn't over, Alexandra. I bestowed a knowing smile on her. Actually, it is. Mom took care of it. After lunch, I drove to the university to meet Dr. Chen and his team. The lab was buzzing with excitement. This could revolutionize ocean cleanup, Dr. Chen explained, showing me the data. With the funding you've provided, we'll be able to scale this work to the entire world. I thought of Dad, his disdain for environmental efforts, his obsession with short-term profits rather than long-term impact. Mom saw a different future. Now I was making it a reality. In the evening, Alice called again. The board meeting just ended, she said. Sarah has been removed as CEO. I exhaled slowly, giving myself a hard time to calm down. They've appointed an interim head while they reassessed the direction of the company. I already knew Sarah wasn't going to take this very well. How is she handling it? Alice stammered. She's threatening legal action, claiming familial rights to the position. Let her, I said. The shareholders won't support her not after today. Alice sighed. That's not all. Some of the board members are proposing a merger with your mother's companies. They believe it's the only way to save Clark Enterprises. I almost laughed. Dad's company, begging to be saved from the very environmental initiatives he was ridiculing. Not interested. Alice wasn't surprised. That's what I thought you'd say. Hanging up the phone, I opened my laptop, going over the final details for tomorrow's press conference. Mom's legacy was alive and thriving, just as she'd planned. My phone buzzed again. Uncle Robert. His message was brief. Alexandra, think about what you're doing to your family. I thought about Mom quietly building something meaningful while Dad and Sarah chased profit and power. I thought about the years of being rejected, belittled, made to feel like I didn't belong. I looked at Uncle Robert's message again. Alexandra, think about what you're doing to your family. I took a slow breath, then typed my reply. I think about the family. I'm giving her a future. That night, as I was preparing a speech for tomorrow's press conference, I found an old photo album tucked away in my desk drawer. In the first picture, Mom was at my college graduation and I was proudly accepting my marine biology degree. Dad and Sarah weren't there. They had a business meeting. In the other photo, Mom is in the garden, kneeling in the soil, teaching me about ecosystems when I was little. She always kept my curiosity alive, encouraged my need to protect the environment, even when the rest of the family laughed at it. And now I realized, she'd been playing the long game all along, preparing me for this moment. My phone buzzed again. News alert. Clark Enterprises stock hit a 5-year low amid a management crisis. I closed the article and opened my email. Dr. Chen's final presentation was waiting to be checked. Tomorrow we would present to the world a different way of doing business, one in which sustainability was more important than greed, innovation more important than stagnation. Sarah might still be clinging to Dad's company, but I had something better, Mom's vision of the future and the power to make it happen. This wasn't just the next chapter of my life. It was the next chapter of the Clark legacy, and this time it would be written on my terms. Another message interrupted my thoughts. From Sarah. They're destroying everything Dad built. Please, Lexa, help me make it right. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, Sarah. They're meant to be transformed. A year after my mother's revelations changed everything, I stood at a podium overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Behind me, the first of our large-scale ocean cleanup systems was being launched, a dream I had nurtured since my undergraduate days, and now a reality thanks to Mom's legacy. I exhaled, then turned to the crowd of reporters, scientists, and investors gathered before me. Today is not just an environmental victory. It's proof that business and responsibility are not opposing forces. Success is measured not just in quarterly profits, but in the legacy we leave for future generations. As I surveyed the audience, my gaze stopped on Sarah. She sat in the last row and was quieter than I'd ever seen her, less polished, more human. Clark Enterprises had been completely transformed over the past year, but not in the way Sarah had imagined. After her removal as CEO, the board of directors had made the unthinkable decision to liquidate the company. Its divisions were sold off to organizations with a stronger environmental ethic. The name Clark, once synonymous with corporate power, took on a new meaning. As my speech ended and the purification system came to life, Sarah approached the podium. "Great speech," she said, her voice softer, stripped of its usual sharpness. "Mom would be proud." I studied her carefully, no offense, no defensiveness. "How are you, Sarah?" "Really?" She hesitated, then smiled regretfully. "Surviving. It's different not being Sarah Clark, the CEO, but maybe it's not so bad." We walked along the shoreline, watching the purification system work. The technology had already shown promising results in the early stages of testing. After a long silence, Sarah said, "You know what I realized? I spent so many years trying to be exactly what Dad wanted. I never really thought about what I wanted for myself." I turned to her. "And what do you want?" She exhaled slowly, watching the waves. "I volunteer at a marine education center, teaching kids about ocean conservation. It's amazing to see their faces light up when they realize something new." A genuine smile appeared on my face. "Mom would have loved that." "Yeah," Sarah muttered. "She would have loved it." Later in the afternoon, Alice Harrison arrived at my office with the latest reports. The value of Mom's companies had tripled, but more importantly, our environmental initiatives were making a tangible difference. "There's something else," Alice said, placing an envelope on my desk. "We found this in your Mom's old files." She left instructions to deliver it today. I unfolded the letter, and my breath caught at the sight of Mom's familiar handwriting. "My dear Alexandra, if you're reading this, it's been a year since you found out about your inheritance. I hope you've used that time wisely. From what I've been able to track, I believe you have. But there's one more thing I want you to realize. Your sister, no matter what, is still your sister. Sarah was as much a victim of your father's rigid worldview as you are. She just dealt with it differently. Now that his influence is gone, she might surprise you. I've left instructions for Alice to set up a separate fund dedicated to environmental education initiatives. If Sarah shows any sign of change, any willingness to look at the world differently, I want you to offer her the opportunity to run it. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not to defeat our enemies, but to help them become better people. Love, Mom. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing Mom's last lesson. Even now, she was teaching me not strategy or business, but grace and wisdom. That evening, I took Sarah out to dinner. As we sat on the back porch, the air crisp around us, I told her about Mom's letter and educational foundation. "You don't have to make a decision right away," I said carefully. "But if you're serious about working in marine education—" Sarah interrupted me. "Why would you trust me with that? After everything?" I pondered my mom's words. "Because sometimes people deserve a chance to rewrite their history." Sarah swallowed hard, brushing away unexpected tears. "I've been horrible to you over the years. I helped my father destroy you because it made me feel more secure in my own place in his world." "I know," I said simply, "but that's not where you belong." Over the next few months, Sarah dove headfirst into her work. She took to creating educational programs with the same intensity she had once taken on corporate takeovers. It was strange at first, working together instead of against each other. But Mom was right. People can change if given the chance. The final detail fell into place on Mom's birthday. Sarah and I were standing in her garden, which I had tended over the years. Sarah gingerly touched a rose bush. Mom tried to get me interested in gardening when we were kids. She talked about ecosystems and balance in nature. I never listened. I was too busy memorizing Dad's business lessons. I smiled, but she never gave up hope for any of us. Sarah turned to me, her eyes turning serious. I'm sorry, Lexi, for everything. I was so focused on being Daddy's daughter that I forgot how to be Mummy's. For the first time in years, I hugged my sister. Mum knew what she was doing, I whispered. She saved us both, just in different ways. That evening, I sat in my office going over the latest reports on our ocean cleanup projects. Two pictures hung on the wall. One of my mum in the garden, kneeling in the mud, teaching me about nature, and a new one of Sarah teaching a group of children about stewardship of the sea. Her face glowed with genuine joy. Mum's legacy wasn't just about money or companies. It was about transforming not only the environment, but our family and ourselves. She had played the longest game of all, providing not only financial success, but the opportunity for healing and growth. My phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. The kids have asked to add a hands-on marine biology program. Thought you might want to help develop it. I smiled, remembering my mom's last email. I agree, I replied, because sometimes the best win isn't about winning or losing. It's about changing the game completely. Mom understood that from the beginning, and now we finally understand it too. Subscribe to the channel, give us likes, and let us know how you like this story. Click on the bell not to miss new videos. See you soon, dear listeners.